Some men spend their lives fighting enemies who never exist, battling ghosts created by their own thoughts and words. These aren't the enemies you expect, not the kind that rush in with swords raised or the kind that lurk in dark alleys waiting for a confrontation. No, these are enemies that exist only in the sentences we speak, the quiet choices we make in the shadows of our minds, the careless phrases we toss into the air without considering their weight, the ones that seem harmless but cut deeper than any sword. Before we dive into today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest content. Let's get started. Have you ever said something you instantly regretted? A phrase that felt powerful in the moment but, in retrospect, revealed your own weakness? Maybe you've heard a friend, a mentor, or even an elder say something that made you pause. Not because it was wise or insightful, but because it echoed the sound of a man who had stopped growing, stopped challenging himself, and had begun coasting through life. Here's the reality. The words we speak shape the life we live. And there's a particular group of phrases, these dangerous little sentences, that chip away at the very foundation of our self-discipline, our dignity, and our respect. They sneak in unnoticed, almost unnoticeable to the ear, but the damage they do is quietly devastating. But it's not too late. The good news is this: you have the power to change the way you speak, which means you have the power to change your life. In this video, we're going to uncover 6 common phrases that men often say. Phrases that will slowly destroy you if you let them. And more importantly, we'll explore how a Stoic man would respond instead. Because Stoic philosophy teaches us that our words aren't just noise, they are signals. Signals that reveal who we truly are beneath the surface. So, let's start with one of the most dangerous phrases that is often said with confidence, but is really just a mask for stagnation. That's just how I am. It sounds firm, doesn't it? Like a statement of conviction. A claim to identity that says, "This is me, take it or leave it." But underneath that tough exterior is something much more fragile. It's a surrender not to truth or principle, but to mediocrity, to laziness, to the belief that growth is unnecessary. I remember meeting a man named Carl, a sharp dresser in his 70s, retired from the Navy, and a figure who commanded respect without ever really needing to raise his voice. Carl was the kind of man who gave off the impression that he had it all figured out. But the people closest to him knew the truth. He had stopped growing emotionally years ago. Whenever his wife asked for more emotional connection, more vulnerability, he'd respond with, "I'm not built like that." When his son tried to talk about past wounds and old family issues, Carl dismissed it with, "That's not how I do things." Over time, his relationships began to crumble, not from drama, but from neglect. Carl had refused to evolve, and eventually the people in his life stopped waiting for him to change. His wife left not with a loud confrontation, but quietly, having waited long enough for a man who refused to grow. That's just how I am. These words sound like conviction, but they are nothing more than an excuse to remain stagnant. It's not strength, it's self-imposed prison. This phrase is dangerous because it creates an illusion of stability, when in reality, it's a quiet surrender to ego. It prevents growth, leaving us stuck in a cycle of stagnation. Stoicism rejects this kind of mindset. As Seneca wisely said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." This is a reminder that life doesn't stop shaping you unless you stop learning. We don't have the luxury of sitting still and hoping everything will just fall into place. We must evolve, constantly challenging ourselves to be better than we were yesterday. When you say, "That's just how I am," you're not showing strength, you're showing the decay of your own character. Your life narrows into routine, resistance, and eventually you're left with nothing but empty words. A Stoic man doesn't hide behind identity. He refines it, constantly sharpening himself to become the best version of who he is, because he understands that growth is a lifelong pursuit. A Stoic man doesn't stop evolving because he's reached some arbitrary age or milestone. He embraces life's challenges as opportunities to better himself. Think about it. We are all constantly changing. The man who says, "That's just how I am," has stopped being open to that change. He's chosen comfort over growth, and that, my friends, is the root of decline. When you stop being willing to adapt, to evolve, you start decaying. Your words become shorter, your mind closes, and your life becomes a monotony of resistance. So the first step towards transformation is this: stop making excuses. Stop hiding behind the phrase, "That's just how I am." It's time to challenge yourself. It's time to evolve. Now let's move to another phrase that's just as destructive. Real men don't talk about feelings. This one is deeply ingrained in many cultures, especially among older generations, where emotional suppression was often seen as a sign of strength. Keep it together, they'd say. Don't show weakness. But what they failed to realize is that by burying emotions, by pretending they don't exist, they were creating an environment for silent suffering. This isn't about strength, it's about avoidance. It's a dangerous fallacy, one that encourages men to bottle up their emotions until they come out in harmful ways, like anger, addiction, or detachment. And what does it lead to? Isolation, emotional numbness, and the complete inability to truly connect with others. Look at the research. The American Psychological Association has shown that men who suppress their emotions are at a significantly higher risk for depression, cardiovascular disease, and even early death. Yet, despite these warnings, many still cling to the idea that real men never talk about their feelings. Here's where Stoicism can show us a better way. Stoicism doesn't teach us to suppress our emotions. It teaches us to understand and control them. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, was open about his own struggles with fear, grief, and doubt. He didn't suppress these feelings, he faced them head-on, writing them down in his personal journals so that he could learn from them. This is what true emotional clarity looks like. It's not about avoiding feelings. It's about understanding them. A Stoic man doesn't fear his emotions. He welcomes them as signals that can help him understand himself better. But, and this is key, he doesn't allow his emotions to control him. He doesn't let them define his actions or reactions. Instead, he responds from a place of stillness, not impulse. Think about this for a moment. How often do we hide our emotions behind a mask of toughness or indifference? How often do we withhold our true selves from others, thinking it makes us stronger? In reality, it only isolates us further. Emotional maturity is not about avoiding feelings, but learning to face them with courage and composure. Here's the challenge. Next time you feel overwhelmed, stressed, or frustrated, don't suppress it. Acknowledge it. Name the feeling. Understand where it's coming from. Ask yourself why you feel that way and what it is teaching you. That's the first step to mastering your emotions. The Stoic response is not to run from these feelings, but to engage with them fully, to dissect them, and to use them to grow. I've met many men who live by the motto of real men don't talk about feelings. They walk around with a facade of toughness, but inside they're carrying the weight of unspoken fears and insecurities. One such man, John, was a successful entrepreneur. He had built a thriving business, a beautiful home, and a loving family. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. But John rarely spoke to his wife about how he felt. He never shared his concerns, his frustrations, or even his hopes for the future. Instead, he kept everything inside, thinking that sharing his vulnerability would make him weak. Over time, his relationship with his wife began to deteriorate. They weren't arguing or fighting, there was just a quiet distance growing between them. His wife started feeling emotionally disconnected, and John felt more and more like he was carrying the weight of the world alone. His stoic silence had become a wall, not a source of strength, but a barrier that kept him isolated from the very people he loved most. That's the danger of believing real men don't talk about feelings. It doesn't make you stronger, it makes you disconnected. It doesn't empower you, it drains you. Remember, Stoicism teaches us that emotional clarity is strength. A Stoic man doesn't shy away from his emotions. He learns to understand and regulate them. The real power lies in the ability to face your emotions with courage, to reflect on them, and to learn from them. True emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing what you feel, it's about managing how you respond. So, let's drop the myth of real men don't talk about feelings. Let's replace it with the Stoic truth. Real men understand and manage their feelings. Now let's tackle one of the most harmful phrases men can say, "It's not my fault." On the surface, it might seem like a simple defense, a way of protecting oneself from blame. But in reality, this phrase reveals much deeper issues. It speaks to a mindset of victimhood, a mindset that believes the world is constantly against you and that you as a person have no power to change your circumstances. When a man constantly says, "It's not my fault," what he's really doing is shifting responsibility away from himself. He's creating a narrative where he is always the victim, the one who's been wronged, the one who had no control over the situation. But this mindset doesn't empower a man, it disempowers him. It strips him of agency and prevents him from taking charge of his life. Let's think about it for a second. If you always believe that external forces are to blame for your circumstances, you are giving up control. You are relinquishing your power to change, to adapt, and to overcome. That's the trap of the victim mindset. It's comfortable, it's easy, but it's also a prison. In Stoicism, one of the core principles is that we cannot control external events. What we can control, however, is how we respond to them. Epictetus, one of the most prominent Stoic philosophers, famously said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our opinions about them." This means that our reactions to circumstances are what truly determine our peace of mind, not the events themselves. When a man constantly says, "It's not my fault," he is handing over control of his reactions to others. He's letting the world dictate his emotions and actions. This, in the Stoic worldview, is not only a weakness, but it's a failure to live in accordance with one's true power. Consider the story of Sam, a man I met years ago. Sam had always been the first to point fingers whenever something went wrong. Whether it was at work, in his personal life, or in his relationships, his go-to response was always the same. "It's not my fault." He blamed his colleagues for not pulling their weight, his family for not understanding him, and even life itself for throwing obstacles in his path. At first, it seemed like Sam was just unlucky, but after a while, it became clear that his unwillingness to take responsibility was causing most of his problems. His colleagues began to avoid him, frustrated by his constant complaints. His relationships grew strained, as no one likes to be around someone who never takes responsibility for their actions. Even his career stagnated because he spent more time blaming others than looking inward to improve himself. But here's the key. Sam could have been in control of his situation. He could have taken ownership, made changes, and moved forward. Instead, he was stuck in a cycle of blaming everyone but himself. His life was defined by external forces, key things he could not control, and his reactions to them were often passive or reactive. This is what happens when you live by the mantra, "It's not my fault." You fail to realize that how you respond to events is where your true power lies. No matter what happens to you, you always have the power to choose how to react. By taking ownership of your actions and their consequences, you regain control of your life. This is the essence of Stoic philosophy. Let's talk about how to shift away from this mindset. The first step is to stop blaming others or external circumstances for your problems. Instead, ask yourself, what can I control in this situation? The Stoics teach us to focus on what is within our power, our reactions, our decisions, and our mindset. If you can start owning your responses, you'll find that the external world has much less power over you. For example, if you're facing a difficult situation at work, instead of saying, "It's not my fault," try asking yourself, "What can I do to improve this?" If you're dealing with a relationship issue, rather than blaming the other person, reflect on your own actions and how you might change to foster better communication and understanding. Taking ownership doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong. It means accepting responsibility for what is in your control and finding ways to improve, adapt, and grow. The Stoic man understands that external circumstances are often out of his hands, but he also knows that his reaction to them is always within his control. So let's make a pact. Let's stop saying, "It's not my fault," and start saying, "It's my responsibility." Own your power, own your life, because only when you take responsibility for your actions can you begin to truly change and grow. Let's continue by addressing a phrase that often slips from the lips of those who feel entitled without doing the work to earn it. I deserve better. On the surface, this might seem like an expression of self-respect, a statement of worthiness. But in reality, it often reveals something far darker: entitlement. The man who says, "I deserve better," is usually demanding something for nothing. He's expecting rewards without the effort. And that mindset is a fast track to mediocrity. There's an undeniable truth in the Stoic worldview. Life owes you nothing: dignity, respect, success. None of these come from some inherent right to them. They come from the work you put in, the discipline you develop, and the choices you make every single day. To say, "I deserve better" without earning it is not a declaration of self-worth. It's an admission that you believe the world should give you more without any effort on your part. Let me share a story of a man I once worked with, Derek. Derek was a bright, capable individual with great potential. Yet, he always felt that life owed him something. He was unhappy in his job and kept talking about how he deserved better, how he should have been promoted or given more opportunities. He believed that because he had worked hard for a few years, success should have been handed to him. But the problem was, Derek didn't do anything extra. He didn't go above and beyond. He didn't take on challenges outside of his standard duties. He expected others to see his potential and reward him for it, but he hadn't taken the steps necessary to prove that he was worthy of more. One day, Derek came into my office, visibly frustrated. "I just don't get it," he said. "I've been here for 5 years. I work hard. I deserve better than this." I asked him a simple question. "What have you done in the last 5 years to earn the better you think you deserve?" Derek was speechless. The truth was, he had done the minimum required to get by. He didn't put in the extra effort, didn't push himself to grow, and certainly didn't develop new skills. He thought that just by showing up, he should have been rewarded. This kind of thinking is the antithesis of Stoicism. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." The Stoic does not expect life to hand him success on a silver platter. Instead, he works diligently with purpose and discipline because he understands that success is a result of his actions, not his expectations. When you say, "I deserve better," you're essentially claiming that the world owes you something. But the Stoic mindset flips this idea on its head. It teaches that you owe the world your best. The Stoic doesn't wait for the world to recognize his value. He proves his value through his actions. I know a man named William who embodies this principle. William was a carpenter. He didn't have any formal education, but he had an incredible work ethic. He understood that he wasn't owed anything, so he put in the time to hone his craft day in and day out. He worked on small projects at first, and as he built his reputation, he took on larger, more challenging jobs. Eventually, his reputation grew, and so did his business. He didn't sit back and wait for success to find him. He worked for it. Every day, he improved his skills, pushed through discomfort, and earned his success, one project at a time. William understood the core Stoic truth that you get what you work for, not what you think you deserve. Now let's turn our focus to another phrase that reflects a deep sense of complacency. That's not my job. This phrase might seem harmless at first, a way to set boundaries and protect oneself from burnout. But it's often a sign of someone who has stopped leading and settled into a pattern of minimal effort. When a man starts saying, "That's not my job," he is effectively saying, "I'm only willing to do the bare minimum." Stoic philosophy teaches us that we should strive to live with purpose, not just fulfill a set of duties assigned to us. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is your vocation? To be a good man." This idea transcends job descriptions. Stoicism isn't about merely fulfilling obligations. It's about striving to be the best version of yourself, regardless of the task. Take the example of Rai, a machinist I once met. He worked for 30 years, showing up at 5 a.m. every day, doing the same work with diligence. On the surface, he seemed like the epitome of a dedicated employee. But when it came to his personal life, Rai lived by one phrase: "That's not my job." Helping his wife with household chores, not his job. Taking care of his son's schoolwork, not his job. Addressing any emotional issues in his marriage, definitely not his job. His wife tolerated this for years, but as time went on, the emotional disconnect between them grew. Eventually, his wife left. When Rai sat alone in his kitchen after their separation, he muttered, "I did everything I was supposed to do." But what he failed to realize was that simply doing the minimum wasn't enough. It wasn't about fulfilling job descriptions, it was about living with purpose in all areas of his life. A Stoic man does not confine himself to the narrow boundaries of what's in his job description. He takes responsibility for whatever task is at hand and does it with the same discipline and purpose that he applies to everything else in his life. The Stoic asks himself what needs to be done and then does it without complaint or hesitation. It's not about being a martyr or doing more than your fair share. It's about being fully present and engaged in whatever you do. Whether it's a work project, a family commitment, or a personal challenge, the Stoic man doesn't limit himself to a specific role. He embraces the responsibility to do his best regardless of the task. If you find yourself saying, "That's not my job," ask yourself, what can I do to contribute in this situation? Shift your mindset from "it's not my responsibility" to "what can I do to help?" This shift in thinking will not only make you more valuable to others, but it will also enrich your own life, giving it more meaning and purpose. We're going deeper now, and it's time to confront a phrase that many use as a defense mechanism against the harshness of life. It is what it is. At first glance, this might seem like an expression of Stoic acceptance, a way of acknowledging reality without resistance, but it's far more insidious than that. When a man constantly uses this phrase, he's not embracing reality, he's resigning to it, he's giving up. He's choosing to ignore the very power he has to shape his life, to take action, to improve his circumstances. When you say "it is what it is," you're essentially letting go of responsibility. You're saying, "I'm not going to fight for what matters. I'm not going to put in the work to change the things that can be changed." It's a form of emotional resignation, a refusal to engage with life on a meaningful level. Stoicism teaches us that we can't control external events, but we can control how we respond to them. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, understood this principle deeply. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." When life gets tough, when things aren't going the way we want, it's easy to throw our hands up in the air and say, "It is what it is." But doing so is not Stoic. A Stoic doesn't simply accept life's challenges without resistance. He faces them head-on, understanding that acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It means recognizing the reality of a situation and then responding with intention and purpose. Think about a time in your own life when you've used this phrase. Maybe it was during a tough time at work, or in a relationship that wasn't going the way you hoped. Instead of trying to change things, you shrugged and said, "It is what it is." But did that make you feel empowered? Or did it leave you feeling helpless, passive, and detached? This phrase is often used by people who have lost their sense of agency. They've given up on the idea that they can make a difference, that their actions matter. They've stopped fighting for what they want because they're tired or defeated. But in doing so, they've let go of their power, the very power they need to create change in their lives. Let me share the story of Sarah, a woman I met during a leadership seminar. Sarah was incredibly talented with a brilliant mind for business, but she had been stuck in a job that she hated for years. She would often say, "It is what it is," when talking about her situation, as though she had no choice in the matter. Her frustrations with her career, her dreams of starting her own business, all of them felt beyond her reach. She had given up on pursuing her passions and accepted her current reality as just the way things were. One day, during a coaching session, I asked her, "What would you do if you didn't have to say, 'It is what it is'? What would you do if you had the power to change this situation?" Sarah looked at me with a mixture of surprise and hesitation. It was as if no one had ever asked her to consider that before. After a long pause, she said, "I would start my own business. I'd create something that aligns with my values. I'd help people in a way that feels meaningful." That moment was a turning point for Sarah. She realized that "it is what it is" was not acceptance, it was avoidance. She was resigning to a life she wasn't passionate about instead of fighting for the life she truly wanted. The Stoic response would be this: "I see what is, but I can change what will be." This is the difference between resignation and resilience. Resignation says, "It is what it is," and gives up. Resilience says, "I can't control this situation, but I can control my response," and takes action. The truth is, life will throw challenges your way. People will disappoint you. Things won't always go according to plan, but in those moments, you have a choice. You can either give up and accept things passively, or you can take responsibility for how you respond, push through the discomfort, and strive for something better. When you catch yourself saying, "It is what it is," stop for a moment. Ask yourself, what can I do about this? What can I change? What steps can I take to move forward, even if it's just one small step? The Stoic mindset isn't about blind acceptance, it's about clarity of mind and the courage to act. For example, when you're dealing with a difficult situation at work, instead of simply resigning to it with, "It is what it is," consider asking, "What can I control in this situation?" Maybe it's how you approach the task, how you communicate with colleagues, or how you manage your emotions. Small shifts in perspective and action can create monumental changes. When you use "it is what it is" as a way to let go of responsibility, you give up your power. But when you choose to engage with the challenge, to find a way to take ownership, you reclaim your power. You start shaping your own destiny instead of letting life shape you. So, the next time you feel yourself drifting into passivity, remind yourself, "I am not giving up. I am stepping up." As we continue exploring the impact of words, let's focus on a phrase that echoes through many conversations. "I'll try." On the surface, it may seem like an innocent declaration of effort. "I'll try," we tell others, when we want to be polite or when we aren't certain of the outcome but want to make the attempt. However, it's this very ambiguity that makes "I'll try" so damaging in the long run. It's a phrase that signals a lack of commitment, a hesitation to fully engage. It's a half-hearted attempt at responsibility. The Stoic man doesn't say, "I'll try," he says, "I will." There's a clarity of intention in those words. There's no room for doubt or avoidance. When you say, "I'll try," you are leaving the door open for failure before even stepping through it. It's the first step toward mediocrity, as you are already conditioning yourself to accept failure as a potential outcome. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminded himself, "Do not waste time on what you cannot control." The Stoic accepts that outcomes aren't always certain, but what he does control is his effort and commitment. "I'll try" undermines this by giving you an easy way out, an out that doesn't demand real effort or responsibility. Take the example of Michael, a man I once worked with in a group coaching setting. Michael was brilliant, full of potential, but he often used the phrase, "I'll try," when discussing his goals. Whether it was a new project at work, learning a new skill, or even spending more time with his family, he would always say, "I'll try." One day, we were discussing his career goals and I asked him what he was doing to move forward. He responded with, "Well, I'll try to network more and build better relationships at work." I asked him to clarify, what does "I'll try" look like in real terms? What specific actions will you take? His face blanked for a moment, and then he shrugged. This moment highlighted something powerful. "I'll try" had become a crutch. It allowed him to avoid committing to a clear plan of action. It was easier for Michael to say, "I'll try," than to lay out concrete steps he was willing to take to achieve his goals. And as a result, Michael's career stagnated. He was never truly committed to making things happen, and his efforts, though sincere, were often scattered and uncoordinated. A Stoic approach would have been radically different. Instead of hedging with "I'll try," a Stoic would define his goals clearly and then break down the steps he would take to accomplish them. No ambiguity, no room for excuses. He would say, "I will focus on my work and I will take concrete steps to build meaningful relationships. Here's how I will do it." The difference between "I'll try" and "I will" is one of clarity and commitment. "I'll try" leaves you room to fail without taking responsibility. "I will" requires you to put forth real effort, to take intentional action, and to measure your progress. Here's a Stoic exercise. Next time you find yourself about to say, "I'll try," stop and ask yourself, what am I truly committing to here? If you can't identify clear steps or a clear commitment, it's a sign that you're not fully dedicated to the task at hand. Shift from trying to committing. Shift from wavering to focusing. Shift from uncertainty to resolve. Now think about a time when you've said, "I'll try." Did it push you forward or did it hold you back? Did you end up letting yourself off the hook, allowing doubt and hesitation to settle in? The Stoic man doesn't give himself that option. He acts with purpose, even in the face of uncertainty, knowing that action is what leads to progress. Here's a real-life example of how committing, not just trying, can lead to remarkable growth. Let's talk about Emily, a friend of mine who was training for a marathon. The first time Emily spoke to me about running, she said, "I'll try to run a marathon one day, but I'm not sure if I can do it." I knew she was a capable person, but her mindset was not one of commitment. She was leaving room for failure without even starting. Instead of "I'll try," I challenged her to say, "I will run a marathon. Here's the plan to do it." We sat down together and created a step-by-step plan. Emily didn't say, "I'll try." She said, "I will run 4 times a week, follow my training plan and push through even when it's hard." 6 months later, Emily completed the marathon. Not because she tried, but because she committed. She followed through with her plan. She made adjustments when things got tough, but she stayed focused on the goal. This is the power of commitment. When you move from "I'll try" to "I will," you are no longer hedging your bets. You're committing to yourself, your goals, and your future. You are taking full responsibility for your success. The next time you catch yourself saying, "I'll try," stop and reframe it. I will, and then take concrete steps to make that commitment a reality. The Stoic mindset doesn't leave room for wishful thinking. It demands action. As we continue, let's examine another phrase that can quietly erode a man's growth and progress. I can't. This phrase seems innocent, doesn't it? A simple acknowledgement of limits. We all reach moments in life when we face tasks that feel too difficult or challenges that seem insurmountable. But when I can't becomes a habit rather than an occasional expression of difficulty, it becomes a self-imposed limitation. It's a sentence that shuts the door before you even try to walk through it. Stoicism teaches that challenges are inevitable, but they are also opportunities. The Stoic man understands that obstacles are not to be feared or avoided. Instead, they are tests of character. As Seneca wisely put it, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. When a man says, I can't, he is choosing to avoid the labor that strengthens him, whether that labor is physical, mental, or emotional. Let's dive deeper into how this mindset plays out in real life. Take the example of Jason, a young man I mentored a few years ago. Jason was incredibly talented, but often found himself stuck in the same cycle. He had a dream of starting his own business, but every time he encountered a problem, he would retreat into his comfort zone and say, I can't. The first time Jason said, I can't, was when he hit a major obstacle in his business idea. He didn't know where to find funding. Instead of researching options, networking, or seeking advice from experienced entrepreneurs, he simply gave up. I can't, he said, and his dream was put on hold. Over time, it became a pattern. When Jason didn't know how to navigate marketing, he said, I can't. When he struggled with time management, he said, I can't. Each time, he gave in to the limiting belief that he was incapable of overcoming the challenge. Jason wasn't just facing obstacles, he was avoiding them. This is the essence of the I can't mindset. It's not about recognizing real limitations, it's about giving up before you've even tried. It's about choosing comfort over growth and failure over perseverance. The Stoic man, on the other hand, doesn't say I can't. Instead, he faces his challenges head-on, saying, I may not know how yet, but I will find a way. The key here is not the absence of fear or difficulty, but the refusal to surrender in the face of it. The Stoic understands that life will be filled with I can't moments, situations where we feel inadequate, unprepared, or incapable. But instead of retreating, the Stoic presses forward, seeking knowledge, support, and solutions. I remember one of my favorite mentors, a man named Jack, who had built an incredible career in technology. Jack often told me that when he started in the industry, he didn't have the skills he needed to succeed. There were times when he felt completely out of his depth, and the temptation to say, I can't, was overwhelming. But instead of giving in to that mindset, Jack sought out mentors, read books, and relentlessly worked on improving his abilities. He didn't let obstacles define him, he let them fuel his growth. Jack's secret was simple. He refused to let I can't be part of his vocabulary. He learned to embrace discomfort and failure as essential parts of the learning process. Every time he faced a roadblock, he said, I may not know how yet, but I will learn. That mindset is what eventually propelled him to the top of his field. So let's take this lesson and apply it to our own lives. The next time you find yourself tempted to say, I can't, pause and reframe it. Ask yourself, how can I make this work? What steps can I take to push through this challenge? Who can I ask for help? What can I learn from this obstacle? By shifting your mindset from I can't to I will find a way, you open the door to endless possibilities. Challenges will no longer seem like roadblocks, but rather opportunities to develop your strength and resilience. Remember, the Stoic way is not to avoid difficulty, but to face it with courage and determination. Instead of letting I can't limit you, let it be the catalyst for your growth. It's important to recognize that saying "I can't" is often just a way of escaping discomfort. Growth doesn't happen in our comfort zones. It happens when we step into the unknown, when we push through the doubts and fears. Life doesn't get easier, but with each challenge you overcome, you build a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. So let's banish "I can't" from our vocabulary. Instead, let's say "I will." With this shift, the impossible becomes possible. Now let's turn to another deeply ingrained phrase that many men use as a form of self-protection. "I don't need help." On the surface, this phrase might sound like a declaration of independence, strength, and self-reliance. Who doesn't want to be seen as someone who can handle everything on their own, right? But in reality, this mindset can be one of the most limiting beliefs a man can have. The Stoic philosophy teaches us that asking for help, recognizing our limitations, and learning from others is not a weakness but a strength. "I don't need help" is a declaration that you can do everything by yourself, but it often stems from fear. Fear of appearing weak, fear of judgment, or fear of being vulnerable. It's an attempt to protect the ego from exposing itself to the world. But the Stoic knows that true strength doesn't come from isolation. It comes from connection and collaboration. There's an old saying, "No man is an island." It's a reminder that we all need others, whether for support, wisdom, or perspective. The Stoic man understands this and knows that seeking help is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. In fact, the Stoics were known for seeking advice from their peers, learning from others, and continuously refining their own thinking. Take the example of a man named David, who I worked with a few years ago. David was the type of person who always believed he could handle everything on his own. Whether it was work, personal issues, or financial challenges, David was convinced that he didn't need anyone's assistance. "I don't need help," he would say, even when he was clearly overwhelmed. One day we were discussing a particularly difficult project he was handling at work. He seemed stressed, but he kept insisting, "I'll figure it out myself." As we talked more, it became clear that David was struggling not because he lacked the ability, but because he was trying to carry the weight of everything on his shoulders without reaching out for support. His pride and fear of appearing vulnerable was stopping him from recognizing that others around him could offer valuable assistance. I gently challenged him. "David, if your best friend was struggling, would you encourage him to ask for help? Or would you tell him to figure it out on his own?" He paused. The truth hit him. He realized that by not asking for help, he was not only making things harder for himself, but also denying the possibility of growth and improvement that comes with collaboration. The Stoic response would have been to acknowledge his limitations and seek the advice of others who might offer wisdom or new perspectives. Asking for help doesn't mean you're weak. It means you are strong enough to admit that you can't do everything alone and that you value the insights of those around you. Stoicism is not about solitary suffering. It's about learning to live wisely in relation to others. The Stoic man embraces the idea that by connecting with others, by seeking advice and support, he can enhance his own wisdom and strengthen his resolve. He understands that wisdom is shared, not hoarded. Think about it. When was the last time you tried to do something completely on your own, even though you knew you could have benefited from someone else's expertise or perspective? How much easier would that task have been if you had been open to collaboration or seeking help? The Stoic approach is to actively engage with others. A Stoic doesn't fear showing vulnerability. He sees asking for help as a path to growth, not a sign of weakness. The Stoic knows that his journey is not one of isolation, but one of continual learning and mutual support. Let's apply this idea in a real-life scenario. Imagine you're working on a complex project at work and you're stuck. Instead of struggling alone, you decide to ask a colleague for advice. That colleague may offer a fresh perspective that you hadn't considered, making the problem seem much less insurmountable. What would have happened if you had stayed quiet, insisting that you didn't need help? You would have wasted time and energy in isolation instead of finding a solution that was right in front of you. This is the power of collaboration and connection. The Stoic man knows that to progress in life, he must remain open to learning from others, whether it's through direct help or simply observing how others approach challenges. The ego is an illusion. The true strength comes from embracing both self-reliance and community. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "I don't need help," pause and ask yourself, what can I learn from others? What support can I ask for to help me get to the next level? The Stoic approach is to embrace collaboration, to seek wisdom, and to be humble enough to recognize that we are not meant to navigate this world alone. Let's move on to another phrase that many people use as a shield to avoid confrontation. It's too late. We've all heard it, perhaps said it ourselves in moments of self-doubt or fear. It's too late to start now, we tell ourselves. The opportunity has passed. I'm too old, too tired, too far behind. This phrase is a killer, not because it's true, but because it creates a false reality. It's a self-imposed boundary that doesn't exist in the Stoic worldview. The Stoic man recognizes that the present moment is all he has. He understands that it is never too late to begin, never too late to learn, and never too late to change. Life is not about waiting for the perfect time. It's about taking action in the now, regardless of where you are or how old you are. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." The Stoic doesn't waste time lamenting missed opportunities or too late moments. Instead, he acts in the present, focused on what he can do now, in this moment, to move forward. Take the example of my friend Tom. Tom had always dreamed of starting his own business, but he kept telling himself, "It's too late. I'm too old to start something new." For years, Tom was stuck in a cycle of self-doubt, paralyzed by the belief that the window for success had already closed. He watched younger entrepreneurs, full of energy and ambition, chase their dreams while he sat on the sidelines, thinking he had missed his chance. But then something shifted. One day, Tom decided to stop saying, "It's too late." He realized that waiting for the right time was an excuse to avoid doing the hard work of getting started. So, Tom took action. He started small, working late after his regular job, using his evenings and weekends to research and plan. He connected with other entrepreneurs, learning from their experiences. Slowly but surely, he built his business, and within 2 years it became a successful venture. Tom's story is a perfect example of the Stoic mindset in action. He didn't let his age or self-imposed deadlines stop him from taking action. He stopped looking back, stopped regretting the past, and started focusing on what he could control, his own actions, in the present moment. Now think about your own life. What have you been putting off because you've convinced yourself that it's too late? Maybe you've wanted to learn a new skill, switch careers, or pursue a passion project, but you've told yourself that the window has passed. The truth is, it's never too late. The Stoic does not dwell on the past. He doesn't waste time beating himself up for missed opportunities or thinking that success is reserved for others. The Stoic focuses on the present moment and makes the best use of it. It's never too late to begin living with purpose. Take a moment to reflect. What have you been telling yourself is too late? What is it that you've wanted to do but have been too afraid to start? The Stoic wisdom here is clear. Don't wait for the perfect time. Start now. Even if you feel like you're behind, it's better to start today than to wait for the perfect moment, which may never come. The Stoic man knows that the best time to act is always now. It's not too late. The question is, what will you do with the time you have left? Now let's challenge the mindset of too late. Instead of focusing on what's behind you, shift your focus to what's ahead. You can still create a meaningful life, even if it seems like the world has already passed you by. In fact, the more you believe that it's too late, the more you're sabotaging your own growth. Here's the key takeaway. Time is not the enemy. Procrastination is. By letting go of the belief that it's too late, you free yourself to make meaningful strides forward. Every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to where you want to be. So, what's the one thing you've been telling yourself is too late to start? Do it. Take that first step today. The Stoic way is to act now, not to wait for circumstances to change. Let's now explore a phrase that many use to deflect responsibility. I don't have time. At first glance, this might seem like a reasonable excuse. Everyone is busy, right? Life demands our attention from all directions. But if we dig a little deeper, we begin to realize that saying, I don't have time, is often just a way of hiding from the truth. The truth is, we all have the same amount of time. The difference lies in how we choose to spend it. The Stoic philosophy teaches us that time is our most valuable resource. It is finite, and we cannot get it back once it's gone. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." In the eyes of Stoicism, the man who constantly says, I don't have time, is making an excuse for his lack of intentionality and focus. He is letting time slip away because he's not using it with purpose. Think about it. How often have you said, I don't have time for something important? Whether it's working on a project, spending time with loved ones, or improving yourself. What you're really saying is that those things are not a priority. The truth is, we make time for the things that matter to us. Let's take the example of Laura, a woman I know who works a demanding job. She would often say, I don't have time to exercise, or I don't have time to read. But when we really dug into her daily schedule, we realized that the time was there. It was just being spent on other things that didn't align with her long-term goals. When we looked closer, we saw that Laura spent 3 hours a day watching TV and scrolling through social media. But when it came to her health and personal growth, she would constantly say, I don't have time. What Laura had was a lack of prioritization, not a lack of time. I challenged her to take a hard look at where her time was going. Together, we mapped out a daily schedule, cutting out wasted time and reallocating those hours toward exercise, reading, and other personal development activities. Within a few months, Laura had lost weight, started reading daily, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. Laura's story is a perfect example of how time is a matter of choice, not chance. The Stoic man does not complain about having no time. He chooses how to spend his time based on what aligns with his values and goals. He is intentional about where his energy goes, understanding that time is too precious to be squandered on distractions. Ask yourself this. When you say, I don't have time, what are you really saying? Are you choosing to spend your time on distractions or the things that truly matter? The Stoic man makes a conscious decision to focus his time on things that serve his growth and purpose, even when life is chaotic. This doesn't mean we eliminate all leisure or fun, but it means we balance our time, recognizing that our most valuable resource, time, needs to be spent wisely. Let's take a small, actionable step here. Think about your day. What is one activity that you often say, I don't have time for? Is it something that would move you closer to your goals, improve your health, or enhance your relationships? The Stoic approach is simple. Make time for what matters. Here's the challenge. The next time you say, I don't have time, pause for a moment. Reflect on how you're really spending your time. Are you making excuses, or are you making a choice? The Stoic man doesn't make excuses, he makes decisions, and those decisions are guided by purpose. One of the simplest but most powerful ways to start using your time better is to schedule your priorities. The Stoic man doesn't let his day dictate how he lives. He plans his day around what matters most. Whether it's working toward a goal, nurturing relationships, or simply taking care of his health, he makes sure to allocate time for what's important. Time is a resource that we cannot afford to waste. When you say, "I don't have time," you are denying yourself the opportunity to live fully. You are letting life dictate your schedule instead of taking charge of it. The Stoic way is to take ownership of your time, to spend it with intention, and to make sure that every moment serves your growth and purpose. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I don't have time," remember, it's not about time. It's about how you choose to spend it. Be intentional, be deliberate, be stoic. Now let's address one of the most destructive phrases a man can use when things get tough. "I'm not good enough." This phrase is a silent killer, slowly chipping away at a person's self-worth and potential. It's a mindset that keeps men stuck in a loop of self-doubt and insecurity. The danger with "I'm not good enough" is that it isn't just an occasional thought. It becomes a narrative, one that a person continues to tell themselves over and over again. When you believe you're not good enough, you stop trying. You stop putting in the effort, you stop taking risks, and you start to believe that you are destined for mediocrity. The Stoic man, however, rejects this narrative. Stoicism teaches that self-worth is not based on perfection, but on the effort and progress we make every day. It's about understanding our weaknesses and working to improve them, but never letting those weaknesses define us. The Stoic's approach is to look at himself honestly, to reflect on his strengths and weaknesses, and to always strive for progress without the need for perfection. In the words of Epictetus, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. When we stop measuring ourselves against impossible standards, we stop the cycle of "I'm not good enough" and begin focusing on what we can control. Let's talk about the story of Andrew, a man who had a great deal of potential, but had spent years believing that he wasn't good enough to achieve his dreams. Andrew was an artist, incredibly talented, but he kept saying, "I'm not good enough." He compared himself to other artists who were more successful, more experienced, and more recognized. Every time he picked up his paintbrush, he questioned whether his work was worthy. "I'm not good enough," he would say, and so he rarely finished any project. He procrastinated, doubted himself, and ultimately gave up on many of his aspirations. One day, a mentor of his asked, "Why do you think you're not good enough?" Andrew replied, "Because there are so many artists out there who are better than me. They're more successful, more skilled, more well-known. How can I compete with that?" His mentor looked at him and said, "But who are you competing with, Andrew? The only person you need to compete with is the person you were yesterday." That conversation was a turning point for Andrew. Instead of comparing himself to others, he shifted his focus inward. He embraced the idea that growth comes from within, and that he didn't need to be perfect to be valuable. He started creating art every day without worrying about what others thought. He didn't need validation or approval. His growth was in the process, not the product. Over time, Andrew's confidence grew. He finished his paintings, he showed them to others, and slowly people began to take notice. But the key was that he stopped believing that he wasn't good enough. Instead, he embraced the Stoic truth. Progress is more important than perfection. This is a critical point. The Stoic approach to self-worth is not about comparing yourself to others or striving for perfection. It's about embracing your own journey, recognizing your flaws, and using them as motivation to become better. Perfection is an illusion. The Stoic man knows that he will never be perfect, but he strives to be the best version of himself. And in doing so, he experiences growth, fulfillment, and peace. If you find yourself saying, "I'm not good enough," take a moment to reflect. What is the standard I'm measuring myself against? Is it an external measure of success, or is it a reflection of my own progress? The Stoic man doesn't compete with others. he competes with himself, striving to become a little bit better every day. Here's a practical tip. The next time you feel like you're not good enough, shift your focus from comparison to improvement. Ask yourself, what is one small step I can take today to improve? What can I do today that I couldn't do yesterday? These small actions compound over time, and with consistent effort, you will find that you are good enough, not because you meet some arbitrary standard, but because you are growing. Remember, the Stoic man does not see failure as an indication that he is not good enough. He sees failure as a step toward mastery. He knows that each misstep is an opportunity to learn and grow. So, let's banish "I'm not good enough" from our vocabulary. Let's replace it with "I am becoming better every day." By focusing on progress, we free ourselves from the prison of self-doubt and step into a life filled with possibility. As we approach the final part of this journey, let's focus on one of the most powerful and yet often overlooked phrases, "I'll be happy when." This is a phrase we say when we believe happiness is something that lies just beyond our current grasp. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll be happy when I find the perfect partner. I'll be happy when I have more money. The problem with this mindset is that it places happiness as a destination, something we'll reach once we've achieved a specific goal or obtained a particular thing. The Stoic man, however, knows that happiness is not a future event, it is a present choice. This mindset of "I'll be happy when" is dangerous because it keeps you always chasing something in the future while the present slips by unnoticed. It creates an illusion that happiness is something external, something that will come to you only once your external circumstances align perfectly. But the Stoic teaches us that happiness is an inner state. It is the result of how we respond to life, not what life gives us. Let's take the example of Lisa, a woman I know who struggled with this very mindset. Lisa was always looking ahead. She believed that happiness was just around the corner, waiting for her to reach it. For years, she thought she would be happy when she landed her dream job. She imagined that once she was promoted, everything would fall into place. She'd finally feel fulfilled, appreciated, and at peace. But when Lisa got the promotion, she found that the happiness she had expected didn't magically appear. Sure, the new position came with more responsibilities, a higher salary, and new challenges, but it didn't bring the inner peace she had been seeking. She was still stressed, still anxious, still yearning for the next thing. Lisa realized that her belief in "I'll be happy when" had kept her stuck in a cycle of future-oriented thinking where she was always chasing happiness but never fully embracing it. She had placed her happiness in the future instead of recognizing that it was something she could cultivate right now. This is where the Stoic approach shines. The Stoic man understands that happiness is not about acquiring more or achieving some distant goal. It's about living in accordance with nature, embracing the present moment, and choosing to be content with what is. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful Stoic philosophers, reminds us, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoic doesn't wait for external circumstances to change to find happiness. He chooses happiness in the here and now through gratitude, acceptance, and an understanding that the present moment is all he truly has. So how do we begin to apply this in our own lives? It starts by shifting our mindset from future-based happiness to present-based contentment. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "I'll be happy when," stop and ask yourself, what can I be grateful for right now? What can I find joy in today, no matter how small? Gratitude is a powerful tool in this process. By taking the time to appreciate what you already have, your health, relationships, or the simple joys of everyday life, you begin to shift your focus from what's lacking to what's abundant in your life. This doesn't mean you stop striving for your goals, but it does mean that you find peace in the journey rather than waiting for happiness to arrive at some future point. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. What have you been putting off, believing that happiness will come only once you reach a particular milestone? Perhaps it's a career goal, a personal achievement, or something in your relationships. Start to embrace happiness today. Recognize that the present moment, however imperfect, is where true contentment lies. The Stoic man is not defined by what he has or doesn't have. He is defined by his ability to find peace within himself, regardless of external circumstances. His happiness comes from living according to virtue, from making intentional choices, and from embracing the present moment with gratitude and grace. So, let's stop waiting for the right moment to be happy. Let's embrace happiness now. The Stoic way is to choose joy and peace in the present, regardless of what happens in the future. Happiness is not a destination, it is a way of being. And with that, the final lesson is clear. You have the power to shape your life, not through external achievements or acquisitions, but through the way you choose to think, act, and live each day. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more awesome content.